Good evening, everyone. We're live on the Mental Health Warriors tonight, and I'm joined with the beautiful Lillian Reekie, who is a parenting strategist. I have the pleasure to actually be with Lillian for the next hour to share with the Mental Health Warriors some wonderful insights around her parenting strategies, her support network, and what she's bringing to a lot of parents. And I'm very excited to be here tonight, and welcome, Lillian. So grateful to have you.
Thanks, Kim. It's awesome to be here.
And we're coming live and streaming from you over in Australia. Lillian's actually joining us from Queensland, and I'm joining you guys from Sydney. So we're going to be back in a minute. I'm just going to play the beautiful video clip for the Mental Health Warriors, and I'll see you back in a minute to start the conversation. See you soon. So I have to say, I love that video clip. It kind of gets you going for a Friday night as well.
Yeah, that's right.
So great to see you, Lillian. I know you've been on the Mental Health Warriors a few times, and, you know, it's really wonderful to have someone who's actually leading the charge with teaching parents, you know, a few strategies. I mean, me being a parent as well, it's so difficult sometimes to go, how do we maneuver this, you know? And so I'd love to hear about, you know, how you're tackling this with parents, you know, who you're working with and what are the struggles that you are finding, you know, with parents, you know, are they similar themes, you know, that we can share with the audience tonight, or is it very individual for most parents?
I think, Kim, ultimately most parents struggle or want similar things. We want to have a happy and healthy relationship. We want to have a mutual respect and love and likeness of each other. We want to be able to get on and have great conversations and just live in a harmonious home. I guess the last couple of years have been very stressful for a lot of people with just what's been happening in the world. And I think the reason that a lot of people are attracted to me is because I have lived the life of a parent with a very beautiful and intense and challenging son. So I have two sons. My eldest son is now in his mid to late 30s, and my youngest son is in his late 20s. So I had a very neurotypical sort of first child who was, you know, very cooperative and compliant and well behaved, and we never got phone calls from the school. He was just a good kid, you know, and he did well. And parenting with him was reasonably easy. I mean, it still had its, you know, ups and downs, but it was reasonably easy. And then along comes child number two, 7.5 years later, and we had a completely different experience. So I think the people who are attracted to me most are the families with kids who are maybe similar to, you know, experiencing similar things that I did with my youngest son, who was very, very challenging. So it is a mixture. I get some parents who have got extremely challenging children, for example, who could be on the spectrum. You know, I spoke with a lady today who has a young 4.5-year-old who has no verbal communication. You know, parents with children on, you know, with ASD on the spectrum, and right through to parents who have got basically good kids, but they just want to learn to communicate and relationship better. Because what I teach is, it's not, I wouldn't even call it, I call myself a parenting strategist, but really it is strategies, but it's not. It's really a way of connecting and communicating and relationshiping in a beautiful, heart-centered way. And I
Yeah.
guess if you're going to call them strategies, the strategies can be used for every relationship, whether it be with parent, child, educated child, husband, wife, partners, friends, acquaintances, business associates, because it's really just a beautiful way of communicating.
Yeah. And even when you share, like, you had a really, great first child who, was stereotypical or, very, good or whatever.
Yeah.
Do you then sort of find that also, you need to still observe and watch them as well? Because even if they're good, you're kind of going, okay, are they too good to be true? And so is there strategies as well? Because I kind of look at, talk to different parents, even though we have challenges, as you say, you could also get the good kids and go, well, hang on a second, there's something that's not right here because they're too good all the time. And so I'll be curious to kind of delve into this conversation with you, Lillian, to really understand that, because I love observing children as well and watching them and their behavior. And sometimes on the surface, I think is not necessarily what's going on underneath. And so
Yes.
they could be sneaking the odd thing in the background or doing the naughty thing in the background. And I know I did this as a child as well. So, I'd love to hear about, how you even deal with the good children as well as the challenging ones. And I think coming from your background, it'll be great to kind of hear a bit more about that.
I think you've brought up a question that not many people bring up, which is an awesome question. So both from my teaching perspective and my parenting perspective, because I started teaching in the late 1970s. Yes, I'm giving away my age, I know. And I can remember when I was a teacher, even before I had children, that most of my focus, my attention, the relationship that I gave in my class of 25 to 30 children was with the challenging and intense kids, because they're the ones who demanded the attention. And the good kids, the kids who were compliant, cooperative, put their head down, got on with their work, they got what I like to call, in the nurtured heart approach, a little bit of junk food praise, like good job, well done, a pat on the back. But the intense kids are the ones who got more of me. They got more of my attention and relationship. And that then transpired, Kim, through to my parenting, because for 7.5 years I had, and my first son was from a prior marriage, just to give a bit of background, and I separated from his dad at 1 year old. But then I got together with my now beautiful husband that I've been with for 30 odd years, and when he was 2.5. But because he was a good kid, but he was a quiet and introverted kid who was cooperative and compliant, but he was a really deep kid, and he didn't, he kept a lot to himself. And we had a pretty happy little family, even though my husband just came into our lives when he was 2.5. And then when his brother came along, because my youngest son came into this world with an absolute blast, and I mean, from the moment he was born, he screamed. If he wasn't breastfeeding or sleeping, he was screaming. So the peaceful, quiet kind of home that we had experienced before my eldest son came along was totally disrupted. And here's what I've learned, which relates back to your question with the good kids, is that because my youngest son demanded our attention from the get-go, from the minute he was born, big brother, who was a good kid, a quiet kid, played with his Lego, read his books, entertained himself, did not get the relationship that he deserved, the recognition that he deserved as a child.
I love that, Lillian.
Yeah. Sorry, what was that, Kim?
I love that you're sharing that, because I think that's so beautiful and so, admirable to acknowledge that as well, because you even recognize it within your teaching. And this is the part, it's like us really becoming aware in that the challenging ones we're giving more time to, or, and you've experienced that as well, even in your parenting. And then sharing that and working out as parents how we can balance that, and so important. I mean, look, I admire that, and it's a beautiful quality to actually really acknowledge that as well, because we can hold guilt around that as well as a parent. Because we've got to go,
I did hold a lot of guilt. But the interesting thing is, you know, and I'm sure there are other parents who will relate to this, when you are going through chaos in the home, when there's disconnect, disharmony, you know, when things are not going well, as mums, you know, we have a certain amount of pride in our parenting. And I know for me, I'm a very, you know, positive person, and I love to share everything positive and what's going well. And when things are not going well, it doesn't feel good. We actually moved interstate to get away from a lot of the negative that had happened in where we used to live. Was one of the reasons we moved away. But it was really challenging for my eldest son. And I don't often talk about my eldest son, but you've really, you know, changed the dynamic of the conversation tonight, because normally the conversation is all about my younger son, who was the challenging one, who the 6 books was about. But here's an interesting story, because when I've written 6 books, so when I wrote my 3rd book, The Revolting Child, A Blessing in Disguise, we had just had a big breakthrough with our youngest son. We were mentoring with a parenting coach who totally helped us to change our family dynamic and our lives. And I asked for the permission of my 3 boys, i.e. my husband, and my eldest son and my youngest son. And they knew how passionate I was. I had already been doing a lot of work in the parenting field, but we'd gone through like we went through a big challenging time when my son was younger. And then we kind of, you know, went through a reasonably smooth period in primary school. And then as he came into adolescence, then it really 10x'd, you know, it was really challenging. So I actually found out something from my eldest son that almost broke my heart when he was in his early 20s. So when I wrote this book, my youngest son, who's now turning 29, was just about to turn 16. And my eldest son was in his early 20s. Yeah. And it wasn't until he, and I asked them all just to write whatever came into their heart about, you know, whatever they wanted to share about our experience and our family's journey. And my youngest son wrote the most amazing, at 16 or 15, not quite 16, he wrote the most amazing stuff that I actually made that the foreword of the book. It was incredible, with such beautiful and mature insight. And then my eldest son's chapter was heartbreaking. Like I was more upset about that than telling the story of our youngest son, because I knew when he was younger that he was going through depression because of the disharmony and the disconnect in our home. I knew that he was feeling, you know, like, I wish this little brother wasn't around. All he does is cause problems, and we can't do anything. We can't go anywhere because of his younger brother. I mean, I'm sure he loved him, but he was resentful of him. And my son,
do you think it was, if you don't mind me asking, do you think it was the fact that, you know, his attention, he had your attention for 7.5 years, and he was this model child, and then all of a sudden this disruption came. Yes. And so therefore it's the understanding of that, and then your attention and time was needed, but then it's hard for children to then understand that, and he's probably been carrying that for a period of time. Yes. So do you mind me asking, because I think this is such great information, Lillian, to share with people, because we are human. We all, we don't always get it right. But the thing is, we do our very best. And in doing that, we then get the feedback throughout our life. And so I'd be interested to hear, you know, what you feel about what that message was. And if you're open to sort of sharing parts of that message, that would be great for the audience.
Absolutely. I know that it really didn't hit me, like in the moment when our youngest son was so demanding, and we were really going through some struggles. Like, he was getting in trouble in ways that, just imagine your worst nightmare, with the police, getting kicked out of school, hanging with kids he shouldn't have, doing things he shouldn't have, taking things he shouldn't have as a 13, 14, 15-year-old. But even earlier on, when he was a young boy, and he was so demanding, my eldest son, as I was sharing, was challenged so much with with what was going on in our family. And I didn't know about this at the time. So when he was 13, he attempted suicide. And
Oh, wow.
and I didn't even find out about that until he was in his 20s. And he never disclosed it. And for some reason, he just shared it and allowed me to write it in the book. And that was just like, it really hit home then that, you know, as much as we wanted to be the best parents we could for both of our sons, we were parenting so upside down. And, you know, and that's why I'm so passionate about sharing what I do with parents, because sometimes we don't know what we don't know. We're doing our best, as you said, we're doing our best, but we don't know how to do it differently. We're parenting either instinctively or we're parenting the way we were parented. It's a generational thing, or we're parenting opposite to the way we were parented because we didn't like the way we were parented. But
Exactly.
we don't get a manual as parents, you know, and most of us do it instinctively, or we see how other people parent. And sometimes we get away with that. If you've got a kid that just, you know, just goes along okay, then they can get through their childhood and adolescence and early adulthood okay. But you know what? The reason I'm so passionate about what I do is what we, and this is putting a lot of pressure on us parents, but what we do as parents, particularly in the formative years, particularly in 0 to 1, then 0 to 3, then 0 to 7, but at any time, how we parent, how we relationship, what we give energy to is going to actually determine not only the adult that child will be in 10, 15, 20 plus years, but it's going to determine their mental health and well-being. It's going to determine the type of relationships they have when they get older. It's going to determine the type of job or career they have. It's going to determine the partner that they attract, the money that they will earn. Like, all of these things are around, you know, the self-worth and the esteem of the child that we're building. In the nurtured heart approach, we call it inner wealth. We're building their inner wealth. Yeah.
And I love that. And I really want to talk to that, because I think it's really important for us to share this message with parents. And Elizabeth from Canada, she's asked whether or not we have 3 tools to give parents that are struggling. And I think it's a really great question. And look, I've got a couple of ideas, but I'll be really interested, because what I teach my children, which is the inner wealth as well, Lillian, is to help them lead themselves. So us actually seeing the signs. And I think that's probably one of the things that you noticed as well through your experience, is you weren't aware, you got given messages, and then you became aware through that process. And that's part of the process, isn't it? Like,
Absolutely.
you know, and I think that's the beauty of it. And I think with all of us, you know, yes, sometimes we might get cross with our kids, you know, we're, you know, angry at them or whatever, and that's okay, because they've either done something wrong or we're frustrated. But we can obviously look at different tools to either manage ourselves in the way that we're leading and how we're talking to our children to help them step forward in the right way. So, you know, if you were to pick 3 things that you share with other parents, you know, what would be 3 tools that you would sort of share, you know, that we could offer to Elizabeth tonight?
Yeah, great question, Kim, and thank you, Elizabeth, for asking that. And I'm glad that you asked for 3, because I mean, I've got heaps, but the nurtured heart approach actually has 3 stands. And, you know, if we stand for something, you know, that means we really believe in it. It's something, you know, that's important to us. So the first tool, or the first stand, is absolutely no. So it's about not giving energy to what we don't want to grow, what we don't want more of. As parents, we tend to energize in our children and in each other the things that we don't want. So if the kids are mucking up, being disrespectful, being rude, not listening, not cooperating, you know, squabbling with their siblings, that's when we come to life. That's when we give the juiciest energy. And we call parents, and, you know, loved one's favorite toy. So that's when the favorite toy comes to life, when the eyes pop and the hands move and the voice comes. And then when the kids are doing the right thing, we don't give them all of that energy. So the first tool or the first stand is absolutely no. It's not giving energy to what we don't want to grow. Just like, and if you think, Elizabeth, of the analogy of a watering can, imagine you took a watering can, filled it with beautiful, clean water, put in some lovely nutrients, plant nutrients, and then went out into the yard and started watering the weeds. So that really doesn't make sense, does it? We wouldn't want to waste that beautiful water with the nutrients in it, because we really mostly don't want the weeds to grow, do we? What we would do with that water is go and water the flowers, the plants, the veggie patch, the herb garden, whatever it is we want to grow. So so it's about not giving energy, not watering the weeds, not giving energy to the things that are going wrong. And when I teach this in our courses, I teach you the tools to be able to do that. So that's the first part. That's the first strategy or the first stand. And then the second stand is stand 2, which is absolutely yes. This is the part that I love the most, because we all strive for recognition and acknowledgement, whether we're 5, 15 or 55. We want to be recognized. Yeah, we want to be acknowledged. And what we do in the Nurtured Heart approach is we help to build that word that I used before, that inner wealth. So the self-esteem, the self-worth, the self-love, the self-respect. And we're building like a portfolio of who that child is as they're maturing through, toddlerhood to childhood to, adolescence and young adulthood and adulthood. We want to build the portfolio of them knowing what their greatness is, knowing that they're kind, that they're thoughtful, that they're respectful, that they're cooperative, that they have good self-control, that they're basically good, kind people, that that they can make great choices, that that they can be great big brothers and sisters, or sons or daughters. And we want to build those qualities in the children. We do that through recognition, and we teach juicy recognition as opposed to junk food recognition, which we call the junk food recognition. You get some nourishment from junk food, a little bit, but not a lot. And they're the well done's, good jobs, thank yous. They're still good to get that sort of acknowledgement. But we have different recognition techniques that we teach that really amps up the recognition, because what we want to show children is not only what they did well, but what that shows about them. That shows that they're being respectful, kind, thoughtful, cooperative. And the more we tell them that shows that they're trustworthy, that they're respectful, the more they're going to grow that inner wealth of knowing, I am respectful, I am trustworthy, I am kind, I am thoughtful, rather than I'm always being told I'm disrespectful, I don't listen, I'm because usually even the best loving and caring parents spend more time telling the kids what they don't want to grow rather than what they do.
And in doing that, because I think that's really great, and I totally agree with you, Lillian. I so true, is whether you're 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 50, it's so lovely to actually receive acknowledgement. Yes. And I think it's a really good point, because we're actually receiving. And when I say receiving, we're receiving a compliment, and we're noticing our child, or whether it's an adult or a teenager, or whoever it might be, in what capacity you're seeing their body change, and they're noticing that. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And I'll be curious to understand, when you're teaching the parents, are the children involved in this process with the parent support, or is it mainly with the parents? Because it's really, I'm curious to know that from, to share with the viewers as well. Because if they're having to lead this, or coming to see you to talk to you about support, and they have different situations that unfold, how do they then get the feedback from the child? Do they then ask the child to actually speak? So I think, that'd be great to kind of hear a little bit about that. part as well in this acknowledgement piece, like the second tool. So the first one is not obviously, watering or putting energy, as you said, the parts that we don't really, the behavior, would you call it? Like, would you label it as behavior or actions or speaking or tone,
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other part is then acknowledging, the really good behavior.
And even in that, if I can just jump in, it's not even necessarily the good behavior, even the babyest steps, because some children who are really intense and challenging, like my son was, we parents might say, oh my gosh, they barely give me an opportunity to recognize them for their greatness and qualities because they are challenging so much of the time. So sometimes with the more intense and challenging kids, we need to look for the baby steps. So that saying, out of mountains out of molehills. Well, we switch that around and say miracles out of molecules, because we take the smallest molecule and we turn that into a miracle, and the children respond so beautifully. I mean, I use this approach on strangers when I'm out and about shopping in the world, whatever I'm doing. It's a beautiful approach because everybody wants to be acknowledged. Even the lady in the shop who takes extra care folding my clothes nicely, I will give her a juicy acknowledgement, not just a thank you, but hey, Kim, I love how much care you just took folding my clothes and putting some tissue paper around them and putting them so nicely in the bag so that when I get home, they won't be all creased up and scrunched up. And you know what that shows me? That shows me that you really care, not only about the clothes, but about your customers. And I really appreciate that. And when I say something like that, they're like I've never heard anything like that before. And, whether it be a waitress or a waiter, that gives you good service, rather than just say thanks very much, we make the acknowledgements a lot more juicy, because we want to show the person what we're recognizing shows about them as a person. And
I love
that's
that,
what
Lillian.
it's all about. Yeah.
I love that. And you know what? I didn't say this before the show, but I wanted to say how amazing you looked, because I love how you look at your image, and you always dress beautifully with earrings and makeup and a necklace, and I've seen you on a few shows, and it's interesting. It's something that I do as well to other people. So, and I do it to random people as well in the street. So I'm very similar. So it's so lovely to receive that.
Yes, and it feels nice.
People.
Yeah.
They do get shocked.
But you know what? That the person we give the recognition to feels great, but we feel better. We walk away with a big smile on our face, knowing that we made a difference for that person. And you know what? That person could have been somebody who was thinking about not living, like not being here because they was. And one person's kind words can make a difference, and the same with children. And that's why it's so important for educators as well to embrace this, because one educator, even if the kids have got, excuse my expression, but a shit life at home, if they've got an educator who believes in them and shows them their qualities and greatness, then that, you hear stories, don't you, where kids have, just had that one teacher who believed in them, who told them that they could be somebody, that they were somebody, that they were a great person. So, I just take this, out with me into the world as much as I can. And, I'm not perfect, nobody is. And sometimes, I have to use stand 3 in that. We got to stand 2. Stand 3 is absolute clarity. So, we have to be clear on what we stand for, and clear with children on rules and consequences. But a part of stand 3, which is another really good tool, when we were talking about tools, which is the reset, which is about, if we feel as parents, let's go back to parenting for now, if we feel as parents that we're escalated, mad, angry, peeved off with the child for some reason, rather than reacting in that mindset, we just do a quick little simple reset. And we teach this to the children through modeling, and we actually teach them the reset depending on their age. There are different strategies. So just rather than I'm about ready to yell and scream and lose my stuff, with the kids or with the partner or with the dog or with whoever, take a few deep breaths, whatever you need to do to recenter yourself, get yourself back into a place where you can then, you might need to walk away, to completely walk away into the backyard, take your shoes off, stand on the ground, or you might just need a few deep breaths, or you might need to just close your eyes and think about, what is it that I really want in this situation?
Yeah.
What's happening now is what I don't want, but let me think about what I do want, take a few deep breaths, and then come back to that place in a much more positive frame of mind. And we teach that to the children as well. So the children eventually self-regulate. And you asked me a question before that I haven't answered yet, but we'll come back to that about the children.
Yeah, and I want to capitalize on your word as well, Lillian, with the third tool, because, you know, Elizabeth asked us for these 3 tools, and I think you've absolutely nailed it by outlining it. And the third one, where you said this recentering, but then the clarity. So you're kind of getting clarity, if I'm understanding it correctly. You're getting clarity before you respond.
Yes,
you're kind of recentering because you're aware of your state. And in being aware of your state, you're understanding, I'm not in a great state, so I need to recenter. And that's great that you've got those strategies for the children as well as the parents. And I think that's such an important thing. So I love that.
Yeah, and it goes along with a really great analogy, the video game analogy. So if you think of a video game and think about kids who love video games, you know, kids who cannot concentrate at school, who don't do their homework, you know, they can't concentrate for more than 2 minutes on anything, but they can play their favorite video game for 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours. And why is that? Because it's predictable. First of all, they know what the rules are. They have clarity. The video game is not going to tell them off, reprimand them, nag at them, yell at them, scream at them. It's predictable. So when they break a rule in the video game, they get kicked out of the video game, but then they can reset within seconds and get back in the game. So that's where the reset analogy comes from. So when a rule is broken, when a child steps over the line, we don't punish, we don't send them to their room, give them time out, consequences. We just get them to reset. Sometimes there are consequences if they've done something that, you know, needs a consequence. That's why stand 3 is about having clarity around rules and consequences. But it's more about resetting and allowing them to go, okay, I made a mistake, but all I need to do is reset, apology if it's needed or whatever's needed, reset, and then be back ready to get back in the game again. And then we as parents have to be ready to accept them back in the game, not to hold on to whatever happened 30 seconds ago or 1 minute ago. Because if we allow them to reset and get back into the game straight away, then we're out of that negative space and we're moving more back into a positive space. It might take a little bit of time depending on what's happened, but the kids actually then gradually self-regulate, so they even reset themselves without even having to be asked to reset. And we parents do as well, you know, and there's nothing wrong with actually resetting in front of the kids. As an example, like if you're escalated, it might be something to do with them, or it could be something not to do with them, just to teach them that, okay, I'm feeling escalated, I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling peeved off, that guy just cut me off in the traffic. Rather than yelling at the guy and telling him he's a jerk and, you know, road rage, just reset, teach the kids self-regulation. Okay, I was annoyed 20 seconds ago, but I'm just going to reset myself. I need to be safe on the roads, and I'm back into that place now where I can drive, like whatever the situation is. And that's how we teach kids. Yeah.
And do you know what? It's funny you say that, Lynn, because I've been teaching my kids those strategies for a very long time. And my son, who's 13, he actually did that. He did a reset on himself. So when you do teach them these boundaries and create these healthy strategies, which is what you're bringing to parents, which I think is amazing. It's something that they can then choose to self-regulate for themselves. And I communicated to my son and told him that I wasn't happy with his tone, his voice, and the way he spoke. to me and my partner. And then he self-reflected. So he did self-reflectivity on himself. And then during the day, he said, and he acknowledged his behavior. So he was able to acknowledge his behavior and said, is there any opportunity for me to redeem myself?
Nice.
And so it was this awareness. And he's then also identified that he was sad and that he was tired. And the reason I'm sharing it with people as well on this is because even us as parents, we can react and sometimes make that mistake, and therefore want the opportunity to become aware and then actually be able to respond and say, I'm really sorry, because we could have had a bad day at work. As you say, someone's cut you off, you know, you're tired, you've had, you know, meetings all day, and then you come home and you take it out on your partner, or you take it out on your children. And it's us to actually do your reset, which Elizabeth has beautifully articulated as well, that she's really received your message, Lillian, you know, by, you know, don't water the weeds, you know, no to the bad behavior. And then, you know, tool number 2, nurturing the portfolio. Yes, appreciating the child. And then the clarity, which is the reset. So the deep breaths and the break. And so it's amazing.
Thank you,
Elizabeth. Your message is, you know, being shared to Canada.
Yay. Actually, I did an interview out of Canada a few days ago. Actually, no, I'm doing one tomorrow morning. I did one out of Ireland a couple of days. I'm doing one in Canada tomorrow morning.
And I know we had a bit of a brief chat before, and I was asking you about your childhood, and you know, I would love to hear and for you to share as well, because I know you said you had a great childhood and great parents, and in, you know, setting up this amazing business and, you know, sort of creating, you know, I suppose what I would believe is your purpose is creating this parenting strategist. You are just in your element. You can see that you light up, Lillian, when you share this. Is there parenting techniques that your parents shared with you that you take on or have used and found, or had a laugh at yourself when you're sharing things and going, oh my God, I remember when my parents used to do that to me? Is there anything that you would share that around that that reminds you of your childhood or early teens or teenage years?
It's interesting because my dad is a migrant. He left Malta when he was a teenager, went to England initially, and then came to Australia with no education. So he grew up in Malta. He was 5 years old when the Second World War started, and Malta played an integral part in the war, and it was bombed, and they used to live under the ground in a well. So when the war actually finished, he was 9 years old, and he never went back to school. His parents both died, and he was brought up by his older siblings. So he had literally less than 1 year's education in his whole life. So when he came to Australia and he met my mum was just a young girl. She was only 16. They got married when she was 16. She had me at 17. She was not very well educated either. She grew up as a ward of the state. She had a very, very cruel, horrendous upbringing. She ended up having quite a bit of mental health issues over her life. She passed away when she was just my age, 62, of cancer. And I believe that was because of a lot of the stress she had. But they were very amazing and loving parents. They didn't have a lot of education. They worked, you know, just labouring jobs and, you know, non-skilled type of work all of their lives. I can remember they worked 2 and 3 jobs when we were younger. My step-grandfather used to care for us while they were out working 2 and 3 jobs. And so they always worked hard. So they definitely taught me the principle of, you know, strong work ethics. And I can remember my dad knew he was not educated, but he wanted education, was so important to him. So he used to sit me on the floor. I can remember when I was 3 and 4 years old, teaching me to count money. So I've always been good with counting money and spending it as well. But he told me, I can still remember, so he was actually using stand 2 unawares. He was actually embracing my greatness right throughout my childhood. He used to tell me that I would either be Miss Malta or the Prime Minister. you know, and he had
Oh,
such.
that's cute.
And he had, I know, right? He wants to be the Prime Minister. He had such, you know, and he used to
Oh, but it's
test me
gorgeous.
on my
Even, but
spelling words, my tables, and he wanted me to be, you know, and he helped me be the tables champ and the spelling champ because he wanted for me what he didn't have for himself. So he did instill in me a lot of things that I think, you know, I possibly have brought into who I am as a woman today. My mum was the same. You know, my mum was so proud. I can remember when I went to university, and anybody would have thought that I was the Prime Minister. You know, she would say, "My daughter's a teacher," or "My daughter is training to be," and like she was so proud because she didn't have the education. So, you know, I think that was instilled in me as a child, and I have always been a pretty positive person. And I think with parenting my eldest son, as I shared with you, he was quite easy to parent, but it wasn't until my second son came along that we really had to find a lot of other tools to put into our toolbox to really be able to dig deep.
Diversify, would you say?
Yes, that's a good one. So had I had two typically, you know, kids like my first son, I probably would have. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now, and you know, I'm
And
grateful.
life
I'm
would be
grateful.
quite boring, wouldn't it, as
Yeah,
well?
it would have been boring.
No,
And
I'm joking. I'm saying, like,
no,
you
but
know,
no,
it's
I'm grateful. I would not want to change one part of the journey.
yeah.
It's made the relationship with my husband stronger. We've been together for 33, I'm married 32 years this year, so together nearly 34 years. He's
Wow.
amazing. I attracted a beautiful man, and you know, our relationship is stronger because of our journey. And you know, the fact that today we all live together, plus one, plus I have my youngest son's beautiful partner live with us as well. We all live together, we hang out together, we eat together. We have our own lives as well, of course. They do their own thing, we do our own thing, but we still do a lot together as a family because we have really worked diligently on our relationships. And that's what I want for other families, because parenting is not just about parenting until the kid leaves home and then, phew, I've done my bit. Parenting is for us to continue growing those relationships until our box day and beyond, because we want to leave a legacy as well, don't we? We want our kids to say to their grandkids, wow, we had the most amazing parents. They were, you know, like, not, you know, like, the sad thing for me with the work I do is having so many people tell me that they don't get on with their kids, that their kids don't like them, that their kids treat them like a doormat. Like I had a conversation with a lady the other day, her 15-year-old's taken off and won't come home. She said, I have no respect, I'm treated like a doormat. And I've got to wonder why that is. You know, why is that the case? And you know,
So
yeah, sorry.
you know the answer to that? Do you know the answer to that? What is your gut? Like, you know, I'll be curious to know, because I've kind of got a bit of an insight around that. What is your thought when, you know, I mean, first of all, I totally appreciate that it is heart-wrenching, isn't it? Because you've been building and putting your energy into building these amazing, you know, relationships with your family. And in doing that, it's kind of like where you place your energy, right? And it's so important for you. And it's really important for me too, Lillian, as well. And so how do you then, you know, how would you deal with something like that with that parent? You know, what's your first, you know, reaction to sharing with them?
Yeah,
You know?
well, I actually did. I run a weekly TV show on my Parent Support Network page, and a conversation around that conversation with that parent, and another interview that I had where the lady actually asked me about mental health and well-being of young girls who are addicted to their devices. And we kind of got onto that topic. So I decided to do my TV show on that topic. And my take on it may be accepted or maybe not accepted, but it's just my take. So when we were being mentored by our parenting, beautiful, amazing, we call him our angel Frank. He saved our lives. He literally saved our lives. He actually said to us, and he asked us a really interesting question, and I'll pose this to the audience tonight. Do you know how gangs are formed?
Oh.
And he said that to us, and I'm like, well, think so. Like, I know what a gang is, but I didn't quite know his angle with the question. And I said, I'm not sure. What do you mean? And he said, when kids are a part of a family, i.e. a gang, like a family, and they feel accepted, acknowledged, seen, heard, and they feel respected, then they enjoy being a part of that gang. Yes, they're a teenager and they still want to do what teenagers do. They don't want to be hanging out with mum and dad all the time, but they feel seen, heard, and respected. So they want to be a part of the family. When kids don't feel seen, heard, or respected, mum and dad don't understand me, they're always nagging at me, they're always yelling at me, they don't understand, they don't listen, they don't compromise, they don't, there's no cooperation, it's just my way or the highway type thing. Kids are then very vulnerable to being in somebody else's gang. Now, that could be an actual gang that picks up on vulnerable kids, a religious gang or a street gang or something, because those gang leaders are very smart. They're looking for the vulnerable kids who don't feel like they belong. And how often do we see this of young people? They run away from home. They don't want to be at home because they don't get on with their parents. It's not because their parents don't love them, or not even that they don't love their parents, but they don't feel they belong, and they want to be somewhere they belong. And that's also why some kids spend way too long on their devices and on video games, because on that device and in that video game, they belong to that community, whether it's their friends that they're chatting to or the community in the video game. Like, they have their own avatar. They can be whoever they want to be in those video games. They don't have to be the lonely, sad kid that's not liked, or isn't happy, or is having a terrible time at school, terrible time at home. They can kind of pretend that there's somebody else in those circumstances, and that they don't like their lives because they're not happy at home. They don't feel acknowledged, and that's why some kids, I think, do take off, because they just don't feel like they belong in that gang.
And do you think also as well, because I think this plays a part in it, that there's so much media, there's so much, these games, so how do parents look at curbing that time? What sort of strategies or that would you offer, to the audience, to sort of say, my son, he independently chose to sell his PlayStation. But he did that through his own choice, and he was playing it 8 hours a day. And I did a teacher on him, Lillian, and I said to him, well, that's your choice with actually choosing to do that. And I said, you're going to be marked on at school for the work that you're not doing. So I kind of did a bit of a strategy on him. And then in the end, I said to him, you may not pass, year 6 because of it. If you're choosing to do this. So I kind of did that responsibility piece. What else do you think would you offer? Because it's such a tough one, I think, for parents, because we never grew up on it, Lillian. Like, I didn't have a phone till I was 22. And so we didn't have the social media. We didn't have the exposure. So, is there anything that you would share, just little tips or tools, to support parents in trying to get their children off that so they can belong, so they can get them to say, we'd like you to turn up for dinner and put down your devices. What would you share around that?
Yeah, and it's a question that I get asked a lot. And I mean, we are definitely living in a different world. I mean, when I was a kid, we had TV, but, otherwise we were outside playing, making things, building things, mucking around, riding our bikes. Like, we didn't have devices, and we had to go over to our friend's place to talk to them and have a conversation with them, or see them at school. We couldn't, So we are living in a different world. And I think, firstly, parents, we do have to acknowledge that we are living in a different world, and that the world today that the kids are in is based a lot around technology. In saying that, though, I think there is some responsibility, from the parents to, whether you use the word monitor or help the child to I guess, to be responsible. So one of the other things we teach in the Nurture Heart approach, and it's a roundabout way of answering this question, is that we don't teach the rules when the rules are being broken. So if you want to teach responsibility, you don't talk to the kids when they're being irresponsible.
Oh, I like that.
You actually teach responsibility when they're being responsible. Kim, I love how responsible you were just then when you chose to turn your iPad off and get some homework done. You know, that really shows me that you care about your education, and that, you know, even though you'd love to keep playing on your iPad, but you actually took responsibility. And, you know, that tells me a lot about you, and, you know, and that, you know, that you are responsible, and that you can make great decisions. So rather than, you know,
you're creating that, do you know what you're doing there? You're creating that awareness. You're doing your tools, right, Lillian, which is you're looking at not watering the bad weeds, so to speak. You're actually nurturing them by acknowledging them, making them aware, and then appreciating them as well. And then they can get clarity and then start to do their own reset, so to speak. So that's great.
So I think, I think it's really about, you know, we've got to teach the children to have self-control, you know, to make great decisions. And we teach them that by recognizing them when they are. So and I'm not being offensive to what you said, but by saying, if you stay on your iPad, you're not going to pass, you know, what have you, like that is creating a kind of a bit of guilt, I suppose. But by recognizing them when they are doing the right thing, and then giving them the power, like you said, well, what you did work, because it did give him the power to then make a good decision to sell his game. But it's really about,
I made it his choice. That's the thing. I said it's your choice. And so I used that language specifically, and I said, you're choosing this. I said, I'm not getting marked on the work, but I said, this is what potentially could happen, is you may not pass. So I'm giving him all the scenarios around it. So then he made that choice.
Yeah, that's right. No, that was well done. And you know, we try and teach kids things when they're breaking the rules. So what we want to do is, because let's face it, we can't stop kids from doing stuff. We really can't, because we might think we are, but they'll sneak around, they'll do whatever it takes to, you know, I've heard some of the funny stories about kids, you know, the parents taking their devices away and they, in the middle of the night, sneak and get it back. And I mean, even kids as young as 9 and 10, sneaking devices and things. So we've got to teach responsibility, accountability, and all of those things. And when we keep building those in the children, and we trust that the children will make great choices, we keep telling the children that you're making great choices, guess what? They're going to start making better and better choices. By nagging and telling them, you know, you can't be on it. Like you can, you know, stand 3 is, you know, clarity on rules, clarity on consequences. So if you wanted to go that way, you could have a conversation, not when it's happening, but at another time, where it's a discussion, not a you'll do as I say, you know, like, well, what do you think on a school night is a fair amount of time to spend on your device outside of schoolwork? Because they'll go, oh, I need my device for schoolwork. So outside of schoolwork, what do you think? You know, and they might say, oh, 2 hours. And you might go, well, yeah, that's pretty reasonable. But, you know, I was thinking more along 1 hour. And then, you know, the compromise in the middle is the 1.5 or whatever, you know. So it's about discussion and cooperation and negotiating. But if you make it so it's the child or the adolescent has agreed to the rule, or you've actually negotiated in a way that they've said 1.5 hours, even though they wanted 2 hours, you know, like that's kind of been the negotiation. And if you're fair with them, they'll go, okay, that's fair enough. And you've got a greater chance for them to stick to that if they've been involved in the conversation. But if you just say you're only allowed 1 hour and that's it, and if you're on it any longer, I'm taking it away from you, and you're not having it for a week, that just doesn't work. You know, consequences like that don't work, because they will find a way of sneaking it, of doing something, and then, like, do you want them being upfront with you, or do you want them sneaking around behind your back? We want them to be upfront with us. Yeah.
I mean, I think the beauty of what you just shared, Lillian, is the fact that you're actually getting them to be responsible. And I want to use another word, because I do it, and I'm sure a lot of parents that might be listening are negotiating bedtime. Like, I don't know, with your, with your children as well, you would have had the same thing that goes on. And so it's the negotiation. And I sort of say, oh, do you think that going to bed at 8:30 is reasonable? And then they'll say, oh, 8:45. And I'll go, no, 8:15. So I'll go backwards.
Or you can say, would you like to go to bed at 8:30? Now, say you want them to go to bed at 8:30. Would you rather 8 o'clock or 8:30? You can choose. Which would you rather? And then they'll go,
exactly.
oh, I'll take the 8:30.
Exactly. And then you're doing
and I mean, that's more for the younger kids, I suppose. But, none of us like to be bossed around. None of us like, and even kids, especially adolescents, right? Once they're kind of, 13 and above, and I think a 13-year-old today is really different to a 13-year-old when I was 13, because I can remember when I was 13, I was still very much a kid. I was probably still playing with Barbies, kids these days are more switched on, they're more savvy, they're more grown up, they look more grown up. Like, once again, when I was 13, I looked like a kid. A 13-year-old girl now with the right clothes and a bit of makeup, I mean, that they could pass for 17. And kids are just more, kids are different these days, and we need to parent differently. Gone are the days where we can be, do as I say, when I say it, jump when I say jump, that real authoritarian control type of parenting doesn't work. And if it does work, it's only because it's through fear. It's through, the kids being fearful. And then as soon as they're old enough, that kid is then going to say, okay, now it's my turn. Once that kid is your height or above, then they've got the physical presence. They're going to go, you've bossed me around, you've told me what to do for the last 13 years, now it's my turn. And then they really revolt. And then the parents go, oh, I don't know what happened to Susie. She was such a good girl. She always did what she was told. And she was always such a good girl. And now I just don't know what to do with her, because now she's going, I've had enough and now it's my turn. And that happens to a lot of kids.
Yeah, exactly. And would you believe, like, we've nearly been talking for an hour. I feel like it's been so effortless. And I've got one more question which I want to ask you, and then I want to share with the audience, just a bit about, a workshop that you've got coming up and how they can reach you. With you coming onto the Mental Health Warriors, what do you think it has taught you? Like, as you share your story, and I'm sure every time you've come on, it's been a different experience. What is the feeling that comes up for you, or, what have you learned from that experience, in coming on here?
Great question. I think that, an awareness of mental health is really important. I also have this philosophy, sometimes we can stigmatize ourselves, that we have a mental health challenge, or that we have anxiety, or that we have depression, because I believe that what we focus on and what we give energy to grows. So, we can say, we can almost sometimes, and I'm not putting down mental health because I know it's real, but I think, sometimes we can, if we keep, what's the word, saying, how we don't want to feel. So if we go back to that watering can analogy again, and I think it's really important that what the Mental Health Warriors are doing is they're talking about mental health in a really positive way, about really, focusing on solutions, focusing on, helping people to feel better and to be better, because I feel like in that kind of arena that there are, people who really just, continue to focus on what they don't want, or focus on how they don't want to feel. So by having tools to help people to to break away from that, I guess, or to even just to have the tools to make different choices is awesome. So I think, you know, the mental health warriors, what they're doing, and certainly what I've been a part of, is really, really positive, a positive move for these people, to, you know, to know that you know, there is a different way of doing things, and that there is help, and that, you know, they don't have to live and be that forever. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I've never really had, I guess, even though a doctor prescribed me with mental health issues when my son was younger, she said I had depression and gave me antidepressants, and I wasn't depressed. I just wasn't coping as a mother. But I can't really identify with people who, you know, and I've heard people on this show speak about their mental health. So yeah, it's I think just having the tools for people to see it differently is great.
Yeah. And I think you articulated that really beautifully. Is there's, you know, there's solutions on this show. There's positive affirmations. There's opportunities to not hold on to those labels, so to speak. We could relabel them if we'd like to. Yeah. We could look at relabeling them, and look, in all honesty, and I think the beauty of this show is, you know, changing the whole stigma, which I think that's what you're bringing as well, is you're offering, you know, different tools and strategies to parents in such a beautiful, loving way, and nurturing them through the challenges, you know, with, you know, the work that you're doing. So I just think it's amazing, and I think there's, you know, there's wonderful opportunity. And so how can everyone reach you, you know, on your website? I think you've got parentsupportnetwork.com.au.
Yes, absolutely. And so parentsupportnetwork.com.au is my website, and on that website it's got all of my Facebook pages and things. If you want, I've got the Parent Support Network TV show page, and I've got an ADHD holistic page as well. And I've got another parenting page for people who participate in my courses. So I love to support parents, and you know, help them with the tools, and with you know, guiding them through their parenting journey. And I love sharing this information so much. So I've always either got masterclasses going or courses going, and I partner with my son as well, who's a naturopath and herbalist and nutritionist, my eldest son.
Wow.
Yeah, so we work together. So in this upcoming masterclass, we are doing that together. So I talk about the parenting, you know, parenting right side up, and improving, you know, and strengthening connections. And he talks more about the physical and the emotional health and well-being as well, of not only the children but the parents too. Yeah.
Amazing. Oh, well, thank you so much, Lillian, for your time. It's been so wonderful to get to know you more and about what you've been up to, and I look forward to many more interviews in the future.
Thanks, Kim. It was awesome. We had a great time.
Pleasure. I'll just say goodbye to the viewers. Nice to see you all. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, whoever switched on, wherever you are in the world. See you guys soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.